My cousin Cody and I used to go on camping trips around Colorado when we were in our early 20s. This particular trip happened when I was 22 and he was 23, and it took place in Uncompahgre Forest. It was my first time camping there, though Cody had been before. We always went during the middle of the week when our jobs allowed it. Fewer crowds, less traffic. Cody was the Eagle Scout between us, so I always let him take charge. We parked at a picnic area and hiked about 15 minutes into the woods before finding the perfect spot. A clearing big enough for 2 tents, our portable stove, and a campfire. Setting up camp was routine. Cody pitched his tent in minutes while I struggled for over 20. Something I haven't had to worry about since because I haven't been wilderness camping since this incident. As the sun began to set, we built a stone fire ring and gathered wood. Cody had brought fire starter and a lighter, so we cheated a bit, but soon had a crackling fire going. The smell of steak and burgers filled the air as Cody worked his magic. He always went all out with food on these trips and was an incredible cook. We had our bear spray ready, just in case the food smells attracted any black bears, though Cody always said that was unlikely. The real thing you need to worry about in the woods, he'd always tell me, is other people. As we ate and cracked open some beers, classic rock playing softly on our speaker, everything felt perfect. There's something magical about those moments in the wilderness. Just you, a friend, good food, and music under the stars. After dark, we set up our little folding table and started playing cards. We'd moved from traditional games to Uno when we heard it. Something moving in the woods beyond our campsite. I paused the music immediately. In the sudden silence, we could clearly hear someone humming and the sound of footsteps coming from the pitch-black forest around us. "Find the flashlight," Cody whispered urgently. By the time I located it, the sounds had faded away. "Should we be worried?" I asked. Cody's face was serious. It's definitely unusual for someone to be this deep in the woods, especially walking by a campsite humming like that. We went back to our card game, but kept the music much lower. Both of us were on edge now. Then, without warning, a large stick came flying out of the darkness and landed right in the middle of our campsite. We both jumped out of our skin. This wasn't a branch that had fallen naturally. Someone had thrown it at us. Cody started yelling into the darkness, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life and get lost." We heard footsteps retreating into the distance. "We should pack up and move," I said. "Absolutely not in the dark," Cody replied firmly. "We both have bear spray. Just keep it next to you when you sleep." The sounds continued throughout the night, branches cracking in the distance, movements that no animal would make. Someone was definitely out there, maybe multiple people. We agreed to take turns staying awake to keep watch. Cody took first shift, saying he'd read his book. I crawled into my tent and sleeping bag, eventually falling asleep despite my nerves. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. You're cold, uncomfortable, and any number of things can disturb you. But this time, as I groggily came to consciousness, I saw a head peering into my tent. It looked like Cody in the darkness. "Cody?" I mumbled, thinking he was waking me from my watch shift. "Is it my turn?" I stared at the shadowy figure as I became more awake. Then I heard the tent zipper quickly close, and the head disappeared. Footsteps walked away. Something clicked in my brain. I shot upright and listened to the footsteps retreating. "Cody!" I called out. No answer. I unzipped my tent and looked out at the campsite. The fire was dead. Cody was nowhere to be seen. I went to his tent that was zipped up and looked inside. There was Cody, fast asleep in a sleeping bag. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My blood turned to ice. I started shaking him awake frantically. "Someone's here at the campsite," I whispered urgently. When he finally came to reality, Cody grabbed his bear spray. He admitted he must have dozed off while reading. "Sleep in my tent tonight," he said, "but you'll need your sleeping bag." He stood watch as I ran to my tent to grab it. As I was stuffing my sleeping bag into its sack, I heard that same haunting humming again from outside. "You hear that too?" I whispered when I got back to Cody. "Yes," he said grimly. We both climbed into his tent and zipped it up, our cans of bear spray at our sides. In those terrifying moments, I actually found myself hoping a bear would show up instead. The hours dragged by as we took turns staying awake. When Cody woke me up near dawn, there was finally enough light to pack everything and hike back to the car. Neither of us was in the mood to continue camping elsewhere. This experience had been too haunting, too unsettling. We just wanted to get home to safety. It's been 6 years since this happened. Cody has suggested camping trips a few times since then, but I've never had any interest. People are just so scary. The image of that person's head peering into my tent in the darkness still haunts me. It was straight out of a nightmare. I may never go camping again.
My dad always told me when I was scared as a kid, don't fear ghosts, fear the living, because they can actually hurt you. I never imagined how true those words would prove to be. In my late teens, after my father committed suicide, I came into some money from his inheritance. At the time of his passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. My mom couldn't afford the payments anymore, and renting it out wasn't covering costs, so it was going on the market in less than a month. For that month, the cabin would sit vacant while they finalized paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. I saw this as a chance to get away and clear my head after everything that had happened. I quit my job, packed my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car to the cabin. The first 2 days were perfect and exactly what I needed. I spent my time playing with Midnight in the snow, hitting the slopes, and relaxing in the evenings with PlayStation, music, and drinks on the balcony. I'd stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was basically a hermit. Just me, my dog, and the peaceful mountain environment. The cabin was 2 stories. Downstairs had the living room, a guest bedroom, and small kitchen. Upstairs had 2 more rooms and a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. I stuck to the main areas and kept all the other room doors shut. On the 3rd day, during heavy snowfall that kept me inside, things started getting weird. Our cabin was isolated, with only 2 other cabins maybe a block away. Everything else was forest and tall pine trees for miles. Both neighboring cabins had been empty since I'd arrived. Around midday, while outside with Midnight, I noticed footprints in the snow around our cabin. They looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there just 20 to 30 minutes before. The footprints led away from the cabin and disappeared into the denser part of the trees. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was staying in one of the nearby cabins after all, someone I hadn't noticed. That night, as I was lying in bed, Midnight's ears suddenly perked up. He jumped off the bed and ran downstairs to the living room. I could hear him pacing back and forth down there for about 5 minutes before he came running back upstairs, doing his little dance that meant he needed to go outside. We went down to the driveway for his bathroom break, but once outside, he didn't want to pee. Instead, he started pulling on his leash, trying to drag me toward the dense trees where the footprints had been earlier. He kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up at the roof. When he realized I wasn't going where he wanted, he just sat down and stared into the darkness. Very unusual behavior for him. Back inside, about a half hour later, I heard what sounded like footsteps on my roof. 6 distinct steps, spaced apart like a man's stride. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a pine cone falling or some forest animal, but the spacing was too deliberate, too human. Midnight heard it too, and ran to the balcony door, expecting me to let him out. I decided to be tough about it. I grabbed my coat, shoes, cigarettes, and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. I lit up a cigarette and started scanning the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was completely undisturbed. Weird. Was it all in my head? But Midnight had heard it too. I started to relax, smoking and staring at the stars and trees. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I kept looking around casually. That's when I saw it. In a tree taller than our cabin, about 20 feet from the balcony, there was what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position between 2 branches. It looked impossibly tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, and skeletal thin. It was squatting on one branch while its freakishly long white arms extended above its head, holding onto the branch above. Its mouth was wide open, but there was no expression on its face whatsoever. "What the fuck is that?" I whispered. I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing. I just stood there staring, and it remained completely motionless. Midnight started pacing behind me and barking softly at the same time. The thing still didn't move. I put out my cigarette, debating whether to shine my flashlight directly at it, but something in my head screamed not to. Instead, I walked backwards into the room, pulling Midnight with me, and locked the door. Once inside, I shined the light in that direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains and retreated to bed, but later that night, I heard light tapping at the screen door, like someone tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and didn't stop for nearly an hour. Midnight stared at the door but wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had this feeling like someone was inviting me to open that door. But at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and don't do it. I listened to my dad's voice and stayed put. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion. I woke up in the morning and didn't waste any time. I packed everything and got the hell out of there.
I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was years ago, back when iPhones still had home buttons. I found a listing that seemed too good to be true. A brand new iPhone for around $300, which was an incredible deal at the time. The seller, who said his name was Melvin, seemed nice and professional over text. He sent me all the details I needed: factory unlocked, never opened, still sealed in the box. He even sent a video showing the sealed packaging. Initially, his location on Facebook was close to me, but when we started texting about pickup, he said he was now about an hour north. I wasn't happy about the drive, but the deal was too good to pass up. I convinced my friend Martina to come with me by promising to buy her food for the trouble. She agreed, making what could have been a boring chore feel like an adventure. Melvin sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police station parking lots to avoid scams. This actually made me feel more confident about the whole thing. We left around 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night. Having Martina in the car made the trip fun, and we planned to go out afterwards since it was the weekend. When we got off the highway, about 10 minutes from our destination, we found ourselves in a very secluded area. Lots of woods, occasional buildings and houses, then more woods. We arrived at the police precinct to find an empty parking lot except for patrol cars. We drove around the building several times looking for Melvin's black Altima, but saw no one. I called him. He answered and said he was having car trouble on the side of the road and asked if I could come help him jump his car. He had jumper cables, he said. He sent his location, some random road with nothing but woods on either side. Yeah, I guess I can do that, I said. We'd driven an hour already. I didn't want it to be for nothing. Martina was shaking her head frantically during the entire phone call. "No way," she basically screamed. "This is sketchy as hell. We're going home." I told her we'd just drive past the location to see what was up. I agreed it seemed sketchy, but I was frustrated about potentially wasting a 2-hour round trip. We drove to the location and saw headlight reflections coming from a car on the pitch-black road. As we got closer, I slowed down. It was indeed a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. Given how dark it was, we should have been able to see someone's silhouette. "Just keep driving," Martina said. "I know," I replied. It was one of the sketchiest things I'd ever seen. A pitch-black road between patches of woods, no streetlights, no other cars. A pretty convenient place to break down when you're expecting someone with a wad of cash. I drove right past without stopping. Immediately, Melvin started calling over and over. I ignored every call. Then he texted, "I saw you just pass me. Why didn't you stop? Turn around." I ignored that too. Martina,
being the positive person she is, laughed about the whole situation. "Okay, you definitely owe me food now," she said. I looked up the nearest diner and we stopped at a quiet little place. We were just about the only customers even on a Friday night. The waitress had just taken our coffee order when a lone guy with his hood up walked into the diner and sat at the bar. He was wearing a dirty-looking navy blue hoodie. He glanced over at Martina and me, then looked straight ahead while ordering coffee from the woman behind the counter. The man kept glancing at our table every minute or so. "Don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be Melvin," I whispered to Martina. When the waitress came with our coffees and asked if we were ready to order, I said, "A few minutes, please." When the counter worker handed the hooded man his coffee, he said, loud and clear, "Thank you, darling." It was definitely the voice from the phone. "That's him," I told Martina quietly. "We need to pay and leave." I waved the server over and whispered that we just needed the check. She asked if something was wrong, and I noticed the guy look over when I said yes. "We just needed some coffee for the road," I said, as she brought the check. I paid quickly, we downed our coffees and left, and as we were walking out, Martina said, "Oh my God, he's getting up." I looked back to see the hooded figure heading for the door as fast as possible. We got in my car and I sped out of the parking lot. Yes, there was a black car in the diner's parking lot that could have been the one from the roadside. I was driving fast to put distance between us when my low tire pressure light came on. The PSI was dropping rapidly. I knew instantly he had slashed my tire. To avoid damaging the rim, I pulled over on the highway and confirmed the tire was slashed. Changing it to the spare took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a complete disaster. And yes, I still bought Martina dinner that night. Now we look back on it as a crazy story we can tell people, but it's absolutely horrifying how close we came to walking into what was clearly a trap.
I'd been seeing this girl named Phoebe for a few weeks. We'd been on 2 dates after matching on a dating app. She was 4 years older than me. Our first date was drinks, and for our second date, she came out with my friends on a weekend. My friends had neutral opinions about her. They thought she was nice and kind of quiet. They'd let her reveal their actual thoughts, but I'll get to that. Phoebe invited me to her upcoming high school reunion party. She said she didn't want to go alone, and honestly, after she'd hung out with my friends, I felt like I owed her. The reunion was on a random Saturday in the fall. She told me it wasn't organized by the school. Instead, some rich guy from her class was hosting it at his house. I thought that was unusual since reunions are typically held at bars or catering halls. We arrived at an admittedly fancy house with a gated driveway, but strangely, there were no nice cars parked anywhere. I figured maybe the owner had parked his car in the garage during the party. The second we stepped inside, I felt like everyone was staring at us, specifically at me. A few people came up to Phoebe with hugs, then shifted their attention to me. I felt like I was being interrogated with their questions about my whole life story, what I did for a living, who I lived with. Finally, Phoebe pulled us away to talk to more people, who also asked really personal and weird questions. There was something else bothering me. All the people here seemed older than 28, which was the age Phoebe claimed to be. Some of these people looked well into their 30s. I made a comment about this to Phoebe, and she said, "Yeah, some of these people aren't aging too well." I asked if she remembered everyone here, and she said yes. Then I asked who the party host was. I was curious to meet the owner of this big house. She said she hadn't seen him yet. Throughout my entire time there, I felt like everyone was shooting me daggers with their stares. They wouldn't look away either. "It's probably because they're wondering who I am," Phoebe said when I mentioned this, which seemed like the only logical explanation at the time. But this was definitely not what a normal high school reunion would be like. There was no music. Everyone was dressed strangely, not like normal 28-year-olds. And again, none of these people actually looked like they were in their 20s. I was getting uncomfortable with all the stares, so I told Phoebe I was going to the bathroom. Really, I just wanted to get out of that room and explore the house a bit.
I found the bathroom and locked myself inside, even though I didn't need to go. I just needed a break from the awkwardness. I texted my friends about how weird this reunion was and wondered how I could convince Phoebe to leave early. We'd been there 30 to 45 minutes, and this unnamed mystery host was still nowhere to be seen. Phoebe texted asking where I was. I replied that I was in the bathroom, then followed up with, "This party is really weird. I'm down to leave soon." "Why?" she asked. "Everyone's being weird," I replied. Someone knocked on the bathroom door, so I couldn't hide in there anymore. I washed my hands and left. The guy waiting outside, one of the younger-looking ones, said in a very low voice, "You should leave. That girl isn't who she says she is." I froze. "Phoebe? Whatever she told you her name is," he said, and he asked what she told me this party was, and I said a high school reunion. The guy smirked. "Did these people look like they're going to a high school reunion?" Then he said, "Trust me, leave sooner than later," and walked into the bathroom, shutting the door. I almost knocked to get him to explain further, but I was already suspicious and uncomfortable. That guy had just confirmed something weird was definitely going on. I walked straight to the front door without drawing attention to myself, though I still felt people staring as I left. I went directly to my car and drove home. Phoebe texted asking where I went. I didn't answer. When I got home, I looked up her number on White Pages. That number wasn't associated with the name Phoebe. It came up as Claire Foster. The address where I had picked her up both times was also different from the address on White Pages, which made me realize I'd never actually seen her leave a house. She was always waiting on the sidewalk when I arrived. I replied to her text, "I had to leave, I'm sorry," and blocked her number. My friends all made jokes afterward and admitted they'd thought she was weird from the start but didn't want to hurt my feelings. One friend joked it sounded like I was in the movie Get Out. My friends and family have had various theories about what was going on. Some people think I exaggerate until I mention the fake name and the guy warning me to leave. I still have no idea what I almost walked into that night.
This happened when I was 8 years old. My parents had me late, so my two older siblings are both at least 10 years older than me. One night I was woken up by a commotion from downstairs. My parents were freaking out about something. I cracked my door open and listened, then went to the top of the stairway and called down, "Mom? Dad?" My mom came to the bottom of the stairs. "Go back to bed," she said firmly. I could tell they were stressed about something, but I listened without asking questions. I was trying to go back to sleep when I heard the front door slam shut, followed by dead silence. I assumed they'd left the house, but wasn't sure why. Later, I woke up again to the sound of the front door closing and footsteps, but no talking. I naturally assumed they were back home and just being quiet so they wouldn't wake me. I heard occasional steps and thuds from downstairs, drawers and cabinets being opened and closed, and what sounded like the fridge opening. I figured it was my older brother Chris, who was 10 years older and often came home late from going out. Him getting home at 2 a.m. and raiding the fridge wasn't abnormal. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, getting louder until they reached the top and made their way to my door. My door quietly and slowly opened. I didn't sit up or move, just kept my eyes open, facing the door as I lay there. There weren't any lights on, so whoever was walking around was doing so in the dark. All I saw was this black silhouette at my doorway, resembling the shape of someone's head. I said every name I could think of. "Chris? Mom? Dad?" Then just, "Who's there?" They didn't reply. They just closed the door, and I heard footsteps going back downstairs. I was confused, but only mildly creeped out. I convinced myself it was my dad checking on me after getting home, though I wasn't sure why he'd ignored me. After a while of not hearing anything from downstairs, curiosity got the better of me. I went downstairs in the dark, keeping all the lights off. As I approached the kitchen, I froze at the doorway. There was a tall figure standing right in the middle of the kitchen. "Dad? I said, assuming it was him based on the size. A deep voice replied, "Go back upstairs." I ran back up to my room and jumped under the covers. All I could think was, why my dad's voice sounded so strange. The reality that a stranger might be in our house didn't dawn on my innocent 8-year-old mind. Not until a little later, when I heard the front door opening and a commotion from downstairs again, the voices of my parents. I went to the top of the stairway and they were shocked to see I was still awake. "What happened?" I asked. They told me Chris had been in a little accident but was going to be fine. I found out months later that he'd gotten into a car crash while driving under the influence. My parents had gotten a call from the hospital and rushed to see him, leaving me to sleep. When I asked my dad if he'd come to my room earlier, that's when they learned they'd been gone for hours. My mom started freaking out, yelling at my dad because he'd neglected to lock the door when they rushed out. Me telling them about the person at my bedroom door and in the kitchen caused my dad to search the house with his gun while my mom called the police. The last thing I really remember is being asked by a police officer to give my story. My parents tell me they felt like complete idiots having to explain to the cops that they'd left me alone with the door unlocked. I don't think anything of value is stolen, and whoever broke in clearly didn't have intentions of harming me, but having a complete stranger in your house is already terrifying. Now, imagine going through that at 8 years old.
I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, who was in her 40s, worked overnight shifts and needed someone with medical experience to watch her mother. When I say I once worked for them, I mean I literally worked one night, just this one night, and you're about to hear why I never went back. The 65-year-old woman's name was Martha. Her daughter, Colleen, contacted me for the job. It's possible Colleen didn't have other family to help, or couldn't afford a nursing home, or felt more comfortable hiring someone with experience. At the time, I was already a direct care worker for 2 other women with developmental disabilities, so I had experience. But nothing prepared me for that night. Colleen left for work after introducing me to Martha, who gave me a smile before Colleen brought her upstairs to bed around 9 p.m. Colleen warned me that Martha sometimes walked around the house at night acting confused due to her dementia, and I'd need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. I spent my time in the living room catching up on TV shows. These jobs aren't glamorous, mostly it's just sitting around. After about an hour, I heard footsteps from upstairs. I went to the stairway and called up, "Martha, do you need anything?" No answer. I heard her footsteps go back to her room and the door close. I figured she'd just gone to the bathroom. Maybe an hour later, I got up to grab my sandwich from the fridge. As I left the kitchen with my plate, I nearly had a heart attack when I saw Martha standing at the doorway. I dropped the plate and glass shattered everywhere. I apologized and asked if she was okay. She started yelling, "Who are you?" I reminded her who I was, her direct care worker. Everything she said from that point was in a loud scream. "Why are you here? I don't know you." I explained that her daughter Colleen had hired me to watch her and the house. This seemed to work long enough for me to get her back upstairs with a glass of water and some melatonin. After a few hours, I was exhausted. Colleen had said there was a spare bedroom upstairs where I could rest if needed. Martha seemed settled for the night from the melatonin, so I fell asleep within minutes. But I was only asleep for about an hour when I woke up to a sound from downstairs, this repeated slamming every 1 to 2 seconds. I jumped out of bed. The bedroom door was open so I could hear if Martha got up. When I got to the stairway, I realized the slamming was coming from the kitchen. I walked down as quickly but quietly as possible. Peering around the opening to the kitchen, what I saw was like a scene from a horror movie. In the darkness, I saw Martha's silhouette standing in front of the oven, repeatedly opening it and slamming it shut. It was horrifying. "Martha!" I called loudly. She stopped, turned toward me, shut the oven door one final time, and started walking toward me, toward the stairs. "Are you okay?" I asked in a softer, scared voice. She got close enough for me to see her facial features. She looked at me with this completely blank expression, then walked right past me and started up the stairs. I followed her upstairs, but as soon as she got to her room, she slammed the door shut. I knocked, asking if she was all right. No response. I quietly opened the door to peek inside and saw Martha standing at the side of her bed facing the wall. This was some seriously unsettling behavior, the kind of stuff you see in horror movies. I walked over and gently helped her into bed, covered her up, and said goodnight, hoping this would be the final time. I went back to the spare room, purposely trying not to fall asleep for at least half an hour in case she woke up again, but exhaustion won out. I woke up later, the room was still pitch black, and my alarm hadn't gone off yet. I looked around wondering what had woken me. Then I heard a sound from inside the closet. I noticed the cracked open closet door and the black shadow of a head peeking out. I almost had another heart attack. "Martha?" I said. No answer. I kept saying her name until she pushed the door open and I saw her approaching the bed slowly, saying what she'd been saying hours before. "Who are you? I don't know you." As she got closer, I reached for the lamp and fumbled until it turned on. Martha was holding a huge kitchen knife in her hand. Everything changed in that moment. Martha was now a threat to my life, and I had to worry about my own safety, not hers. I screamed, "Martha, put the knife down!" My screams seemed to stress her out because she got closer and started screaming back, still repeating, "I don't know you." She wasn't going to be calmed down. She was a knife-wielding dementia patient, and that was not in any job description. I mapped out a way to run around her and went for it. I jumped off the bed on the side furthest from her. She screamed again and swung the knife at the air as I ran past. It was a slow, weak swipe, but it showed she had intentions of actually using it. I got downstairs, grabbed my shoes, and went outside. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen as she'd requested if there were any issues. I was trying to be courteous because getting law enforcement involved never helps anyone. Colleen was yelling at me not to leave, and I yelled back that her mother had tried to kill me and that I hadn't called the police. She had to leave for work, of course. I stayed outside, making sure Martha didn't go anywhere until Colleen returned. When Colleen went inside, Martha was back in bed, asleep. Colleen accused me of exaggerating until she found the knife next to Martha's bed. I never worked in that house again. Martha was scarier than any patient I dealt with in my 9 years as a direct care aide.
When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. I needed somewhere to live that wouldn't break the bank, so I made postings on basically every website looking for a roommate. Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, even my neighborhood subreddit. A guy named Rob reached out on Facebook saying he had a room available. I looked at his pictures to see if he seemed normal, and he did. I was open to having a male roommate as long as he seemed reasonable, even though my parents were very against it. Rob and I FaceTimed, during which he gave me a virtual tour of the place. He said he owned it outright, a modest house in the middle of town, only 10 minutes from my new office. He seemed nice. I didn't get any bad vibes. His price was fair, and his rules were reasonable. It was available immediately, which was perfect. A week later, I had everything packed and drove down. Rob met me out front and handed me a key. The first thing I noticed was how short he was. He was eye level with me. He helped me bring in the bigger bags and showed me my room, which was already furnished. He said one of his friends had been living there and recently moved out. I replaced all the pillows and bed sheets with my own, of course. Rob spent the day trying to get to know me and make me feel at home. I didn't get any overly friendly vibes yet. The next day was Sunday. Rob offered to drive me around town to show me the area. I wasn't eager to, but said sure, to get off on a good start with him. He drove us around, showing me shopping centers, restaurants, and such, but then he suggested getting lunch. A sit-down lunch that felt almost like a date. I really wasn't hungry, and I didn't want him getting the wrong idea. "I'm not hungry," I said. He immediately suggested grabbing drinks somewhere instead. I politely shot that down too, saying I don't drink on work nights. He was being pushy. "Come on, just a couple drinks." I maintained my politeness and said, "Another time." He gave up, but went really quiet, like he was upset. I was slightly uncomfortable, but figured I could handle it. That week was my first at work, so my attention was focused on adjusting to the new job. It wasn't until a few days later that I got home and did laundry, noticing my hamper of clothes seemed moved,
like they weren't how I'd left them. When I was loading the washing machine, I realized a pair of my underwear was missing. I checked my room top to bottom 5 times. It was gone. I had a disturbing thought. What if Rob had... No, I refused to believe that. There was no chance I'd confront him about it either. Still, I was now wishing there was a lock on my bedroom door. That weekend, I bought a lockable doorknob from Ace Hardware. While Rob wasn't home, I swapped out the current doorknob. Now I could leave in peace. I figured I'd tell Rob the next time I saw him, but he didn't come home that night. I woke up to banging on my bedroom door. It was Rob saying my name, and he didn't sound happy. It was 1:30 in the morning. I decided to pretend I was asleep. I was honestly scared to open the door. The next morning, I woke up to texts from Rob. "We need to talk. Be home after work." I responded, "Is this about the doorknob?" "Yes," he replied. I apologized and said I was planning on telling him. He responded, "It comes off today." I was getting nasty, weird vibes from his tone. I thought out my next response carefully, basically saying that I hoped he could understand that as a girl, I just felt safer having privacy in my room. He responded a little nicer, but still said no, the old doorknob needed to go back on. I was confused and upset, but I had to respect his rules. I had installed it without telling him, so he had a right to be kind of mad. But how did he know I'd changed it? It's not like I had the old doorknob sitting out in the open. The idea that he'd tried coming into my room that night scared me. I changed the doorknob back the next day. This is where things went really downhill. There was a knock at the door one day when Rob wasn't home. It was a girl around my age who asked if I was living there with Rob. When I said yes, she warned me to get out immediately. Rob has multiple restraining orders against him from different girls. He's known to be a very dangerous, creepy stalker. I was at a loss for words. I asked how she knew I was here. I knew he was trying to rent his room, and it's not surprising he chose a girl. "I saw you moving in and wanted to wait until he wasn't home to warn you." I thanked her profusely. I was truly terrified now. She gave me her number and offered to help in any way she could. I started packing and looking for other places. I found a studio apartment sublet across town for a little more money. The poster said I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect. I started putting some stuff in my car and texted Rob that I'd have to move out tomorrow because of a family urgency. He didn't answer immediately. He got back about an hour later and asked about my text. I came up with the best fake story I could. He said he'd give me my money back tomorrow after going to the bank. I was super relieved. About an hour later, he knocked on my door. "Did some girl by any chance say something?" "No, what do you mean?" "Never mind. It just seems like you're running away for another reason." I insisted it was purely family related. He said okay and left. The story didn't end there. I woke up that night and screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw a black figure sitting on the end of my bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand over my mouth. "Shh. Please don't hurt me." "Why would I hurt you?" he replied. "I knew someone said something to you. Don't believe what these girls say." "You're scaring me," I said. Right after I said he was scaring me, he started to caress my leg and said, "I don't mean to scare you." I got out of bed and ran for the door. He screamed at me to stop. I ran outside with my phone and called the police, hiding in the bushes until they arrived. I explained the entire situation. They made Rob come outside and give his side of the story. I told them I just wanted to get my stuff and leave. The cops stayed while I collected everything and brought it to my car. I also insisted Rob give me my money back while the police were there, and he did. The whole time, he tried to act like some normal guy. One officer pulled me aside to tell me this guy had been arrested before for other incidents with women, but since Rob denied coming in my room or touching me, it was all he said, she said. I left and went straight to a hotel for the night. The next day, I moved into the studio apartment. I will never live with another man who's not my boyfriend or husband ever again, or just anyone I don't know for that matter.
I was home alone one night for a reason I don't remember. My entire family was gone. I was 15 or 16 years old and obsessed with gaming at the time. I'd sometimes spend weekend nights playing StarCraft or other PC games. This was right before COVID lockdown started. I was playing StarCraft in my bedroom on the first floor when the doorbell rang twice. I hurried to the door, not wanting to be away from my game too long for fear of losing. I got to the front door and said, "Who is it?" as I always would when alone. A soft, weak voice on the other side said something I couldn't hear. It sounded like a woman. I opened the door with the storm door still separating us. There was an older woman standing there with a big smile, her hands behind her back. "Can I help you?" I said through the door. She said she needed to use a phone. I felt awkward though, not knowing how to turn her away. I redirected her to the library a few blocks down, saying they'd surely have a phone. Deep down, I knew the library was closed, but I was trying to get this stranger to leave. She was still smiling, but what she said next didn't match her expression. "That's very rude to turn away an old lady asking for help." The only way I could think to respond was, "My parents don't allow strangers into the house. It's a house rule." I slowly started closing the door, saying sorry. She just stood there, not moving, but still smiling. Though her smile never changed, it suddenly felt much more menacing. I was walking back to my room when the doorbell rang again. There was no way I was opening the door again. That woman had radiated weird vibes from the start. I went back to my game, but not long after, I heard something tapping on my window, a clinking sound from something metal. The window was directly in front of my desk. I had the blinds pulled down so I couldn't see what was making the noise, but I had an idea. My room was the only one with lights on in the house. The horrible thought that it was the old woman and that she'd walked over to my window terrified me. I turned off the sound on my computer. I didn't care about my game anymore. The clinking persisted, so I left for a different room, sitting in the darkness of the living room. When the doorbell rang again, this woman was officially harassing me. I tried convincing myself she wasn't a threat, just some confused old woman. When she rang a second and third time, I decided to open the door and ask if there was someone I could call for her. But when I opened the door, there was now a man on the other side. He looked about 10 years younger than her. "Have you seen my mother?" he said through the storm door. "Yes, she came to my door just before," I replied. He apologized and said she had dementia and had gotten out of the house. I suddenly felt bad, but then he asked if he could come in for a minute. Again, I felt awkward. Why did he need to come inside? I said the same thing I'd told the woman. We could talk through the door. I mentioned that I thought she went into my backyard because I'd heard something at my window. I told him he could go around back and check. He thanked me and walked down the walkway. I thought he went to the backyard, but when I looked out the back window expecting to see him searching, I saw nobody, not him nor his supposed mother. This was all too weird. I went to bed early, just falling asleep with the TV on, until I heard the clinking on the window again. Remembering the concerned man, I decided to try and help. I went to the window, lifted the blind, and saw that woman outside with that same creepy smile. She was tapping a kitchen knife on my window. I closed the blind and crawled back into bed. This didn't feel real. A suspiciously short time later, the doorbell rang 4 times. The clinking had stopped. This was all too coordinated. It felt like a robbery attempt. I ignored the doorbell and stayed in bed. I was going to wait this out. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and for some reason, I didn't want to call the police. I waited until it finally stopped. The next morning, I told my dad what happened. He said I was smart not to open the door. Everyone agreed it sounded like an attempted robbery. Is there a chance that woman really had dementia and the man was her concerned son? Maybe, but it all seemed too coordinated. Why did he want to come inside too? How did he know she'd come to my house specifically? Why didn't he ever go to the backyard when I gave him permission? Too many unanswered questions that lead me to believe I avoided something terrible by not opening that door.
It was the last day of school. I was in 4th grade, the last year at our elementary school where kids had to be picked up by parents. 5th graders were allowed to walk home alone. My mom always picked me up, but that day my friend Dennis and I had a playdate planned to celebrate the end of school. Dennis wasn't in my class that year, but we'd been friends since kindergarten. He was in a different dismissal hallway from me. After school, we lined up single file and walked to the exit door, where we waited outside with our teacher, Miss Blue. I was looking for Dennis's dad in the crowd of parents when I heard my name. Tommy! Tommy! I looked over and saw a man waving as he approached. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and said he was picking me up. I went to Miss Blue and said I was being picked up. She asked where he was, and I pointed to Dennis's uncle, who waved at her. Miss Blue dismissed me, and I went with the man. He led us through the crowd, talking very fast with a bit of a stutter. He was walking incredibly fast, almost hard to keep up with while wearing my backpack. He explained that his brother, Dennis's dad, was working later than expected, so he was driving me back. We got to his car, a dark red hatchback. That's when I realized the giant elephant in the room. Where was Dennis? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to look at me in the back seat and said Dennis was already at his house. I was shy around adults I didn't know and wasn't one to speak my mind when confused, but this was making less and less sense. The whole drive, the man kept talking, telling stories about elementary school days, asking about sports I played and what we were learning. We were in the car for maybe 10 minutes, which for our town, where houses were right on top of each other, was a long time. My house was a 5-minute walk from school. We were definitely in an area I wasn't familiar with. When he parked in front of his house, it looked pretty normal. He let us inside, shut the door, and locked it behind us. It was really, really dark inside. All the curtains were shut. It almost felt like nighttime with only a dim lamp in the corner providing light. He looked at me and smiled. "Where's Dennis?" I asked. He started acting jittery and nervous. "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing video games. Give me a second. Wait here." He disappeared into a nearby room. I heard a door open and footsteps descending into a basement. My heart was already racing. I knew I was in danger. I went to the front door and quietly tried to open it but couldn't. It had some kind of lock that needed a key. I really started to panic, though I still held out hope that Dennis would come up those stairs, but I knew that chances were slim. I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the kitchen and found a phone on the wall. I picked up the receiver and dialed 911. "Please come to this house," I whispered when they answered. "I've been kidnapped." They heard me and acknowledged, but I didn't say another word. I hid the phone under a towel with 911 still on the line and hurried back to where the man had left me. I heard his footsteps coming back upstairs. He called my name. "Come down. Dennis is down here." When I didn't answer, he came up quickly to look at me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I felt so sick and scared. I asked in a very frightened voice if I could leave. The change in his face was immediate. His friendly smile disappeared as he realized I was no longer falling for this. He walked closer in what seemed like a gentle manner until he was close enough to grab my wrist aggressively. He started pulling me toward the basement. I screamed and cried. "I'll let you go if you stop and behave," he yelled. So I listened. I went down the stairs, and halfway down, the door slammed shut behind me. I heard it lock. I walked down to an empty, unfinished basement with a concrete floor and one support beam in the middle. There was a depressing yellow glow from one exposed light bulb hanging from the ceiling. If there was a place you'd imagine kidnapped children being taken, this would be it. I heard his heavy footsteps upstairs. You could hear everything in that house.
After a while, he came to the basement door and called down asking if I was hungry. No, I replied. I didn't want him going to the kitchen and seeing the missing phone. He shut the door and locked it again. I sat there with my heart in my throat. Then I heard it, the doorbell ringing 3 times followed by banging sounds, definitely police banging on the door. I didn't scream until I heard the front door open, but I never heard his footsteps approach it. The doorbell kept ringing with more banging until I heard a really loud crash and multiple heavy footsteps with shouting voices. I started screaming for help as loud as I could, banging on the basement door. The door was unlocked and a police officer grabbed me, hurrying me outside. There were at least 3 cop cars. I had to tell everything to 2 cops while we waited for my parents. This man was a work associate of Dennis's father. When he somehow learned that Dennis's father would be picking up both Dennis and me on the last day of school, he seized the opportunity. I don't know how he found out what I looked like. As I got older, I never asked for more details because I try not to think about it. My mom went to counseling with me for months after this. Let's just say my parents didn't have kind words from Miss Blue, who failed to verify if I actually knew the person picking me up. If I hadn't thought to call the police before he took me to that basement, I know for a fact I'd be dead right now. This was 17 years ago. That man might be out of prison by now.
It was New Year's Eve 2020, and we were all ready for that horrible year to be over. My friend Logan was throwing a house party, and I arrived early to help set up. I'd secured a spot to sleep in his parents' room, meaning I could drive and drink without worrying about getting home. His parents were obviously away for the night. Most of our close friend group came, plus a bunch of Logan's friends I didn't know. The party was fun. At midnight, everyone screamed Happy New Year and cheered with their drinks. After that, people slowly started leaving for other parties, bars, or home. The later it got, the more it became just close friends hanging around, until it turned into a chill drinking session in the living room. This went on late into the night. It was probably 3 a.m. when the last people who weren't sleeping over had gone home. As things quieted down, we started hearing this occasional sound. At first we didn't know what it was, but it started sounding like creaking. We dismissed it as the fridge or some appliance making noise. It was just Logan, me, and Cody at this point. Cody was falling asleep on the couch. Eventually, we got so bothered by the noise that we had to investigate. We went to the kitchen. It wasn't coming from there. When we got close to the basement door, we realized it was coming from downstairs. Logan opened the door. "Go check what it is," I said. "No way," he kept saying. Then he called down into the basement. "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped, and we never heard it again. After waiting at the top of the stairs for a solid minute, we agreed to go down together. We both grabbed knives, drunkenly thinking that was smart, when really we were so drunk we'd probably only hurt ourselves. We got to the bottom and looked through the entire basement. It wasn't huge, just a couch, TV, bar, table in the corner, and various old junk. It was pretty messy. We searched every possible hiding spot for someone, then tried to figure out what could have been making that sound. I noticed a rocking chair. I went up to it, sat in it, and started rocking. It made the exact same creaking sound we'd been hearing. Logan and I looked at each other. I stood up, and so did every hair on my body. I don't think we'd ever run faster than when we ran up those stairs and slammed the door shut. We tried to come up with logical explanations, but there were none. He kept the basement door locked for days until his parents came back. There was no living soul down there, but something had been moving that rocking chair. That rocking chair used to belong to his grandma, who had passed away years ago. It was just something his mom held onto for sentimental reasons. I can't say I've ever experienced anything resembling the paranormal before or since then. It still sends chills down my spine.